Welcome to the second episode of Fiscal Voices, brought to you by East African Tax and Governance Network. With us in the studio today is Professor Migai Akech, Professor of Law at the University of Nairobi, dealing as an expert on administrative law.
Thank you, Tom. So where do we start?
With the power, democracy, and limited governance.
So I think let's start from the perspective of democracy.
Yes.
So you see, democracy is all about people governing themselves.
Yeah.
And if we're looking at ourselves as collectives, then we need to find mechanisms by which we share resources and take care of ourselves. And so the theory has been that we form government to help us to avert, the kind of things that we would experience in the state of nature. You remember John Locke saying that in the state of nature, life is short, nasty, and brutish.
Yes.
So we want to try to avoid that, and the way to avoid that is to form a society. But a society has to be governed in some way. And because then societies bring together very many people, the question then becomes, how do you
govern?
And so the solution was said to be a representative government. So you select a few individuals who then govern on your behalf. And that is where democracy comes in, because democracy then, in theory, the claim is that it is a system of government by which people govern themselves. People rule themselves on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm.
And from that perspective, it's distinguished from other systems of government. For example, aristocracy, the rule of the best, or monarchy, the rule of that individual, the monarch, who in some ways somebody could be said to have a hereditary right to rule. It happens in many contexts. So of course, you also have forms of government like kakistocracy, the rule of the worst. So from that perspective, there's a problem that arises. It tends to be that the bigger the collective, the more likely it is that the representatives will be removed from the daily lives of the people that they claim to represent. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau captured this very, very well. He said that the moment that a people gives itself representatives, it is no longer free. It is no longer free because the tendency is then for these representatives to be out of reach and out of touch. So how do you bring them back
to the people
so that they do what it is that the people want them to do? So for me, from my research, I've always thought that if we are just thinking of democracy as a system of government, then it doesn't get us far. It doesn't tell us much because also representative government is not a perfect system of government. It doesn't work in many ways.
Uh-huh.
So the question then becomes, how do we govern ourselves on a day-to-day basis?
Mm-hmm.
Can we think of democracy differently?
Yes.
And for me, then, thinking of democracy differently would mean thinking of democracy not just as a system of government, but as a way of making collective decisions. So that when people come together, they make decisions in a way that is democratic, in a way that everyone participates in the making of the decisions, and the people that make the decisions are then accountable.
Okay.
And so if you marry it now to theory,
yes,
then you can talk of direct democracy and indirect democracy.
Okay.
Or representative democracy. And so because of this danger that Jean-Jacques Rousseau was warning us about, you'll find constitutions such as ours now bringing in together elements of direct democracy and indirect democracy, which is the basis of Article 1 in the Constitution of Kenya, which says that power really belongs to the people. They can exercise it directly or indirectly. One way of exercising it directly is by participating in governmental decision-making processes, so that we don't just accept that our representatives have gone to some place called parliament or the legislature, and we trust that they will do things for us. But we don't trust.
Is that the basis of stakeholder consultation?
It is the basis of participation in legislation. It is the basis of participation in anything that the representatives do. So the design of our constitution is that really we should participate in everything that parliament does. When it is making law, when it is vetting individuals for office, name it. Whatever parliament does, we should be able to participate in it. So parliamentarians then become agents of the people. And an agent, legal theory will tell you that an agent only has as much authority as the principal allows. And the principal, which is the people now, can also withdraw that authority. Okay. Which is why our constitution provides for the recall of parliamentarians. If you read the logic of Article 1 as well, you should be able to recall a president who's not performing on the same basis. So it's really a way of trying to say that representative democracy has limitations. Let us try and figure out how we address those limitations. And that is found in these forms of direct democracy.
But which brings us then to the question of tax and taxation. Governments run on the basis of resources.
Yes.
They implement projects on the basis of money that is available.
Yes.
The financial planning really should primarily begin from the understanding that they can actually raise resources locally before they can reference themselves elsewhere. So we would wish you to link tax and taxation to these three elements that you've spoken about, because this is important. If I can, if the MP, the member of parliament, or the member of the MCA, the member of the local county assembly has to make decisions that have an impact on my income or my business or my household expenditure, I need to really know how that relates to the question of power, the democracy that you talked about, and governance. Because this is not an ordinary story, and it's not necessarily a story that is taught in a classroom. So speak a little bit to that, how tax and taxation, because this is important. There's tax and there's taxation. So tax, we understand. Taxation becomes a problem.
All right, so there are probably two powers that we cede to government that are the most important of all the powers that we cede to government. I think one is the monopoly of violence, the power to provide security, police us, etc., and the taxing power. Because as you've said, without the taxing power, without resources, we cannot then protect ourselves. We cannot then secure our liberties. We cannot then provide for the livelihoods that we need. You know, to provide a livelihood for yourself, you need roads to work. You need resources such as water, power, electricity. And that can only come if this entity that you call government has resources. Government can only have resources if it taxes the citizens. But that is now where taxation comes in. Because taxation then is a power the power to levy tax that we give government, and it can be abused. Like any power, it can be abused. In other words, for example, it can be used in ways that are not fair, or it can be used in ways that are not accountable. So if you look at the governance around taxation, taxation is supposed to be done according to certain principles, 3 of which I can mention. One is equity, that you want to be able to tax people in accordance with their abilities to pay. So the more that somebody the more that somebody earns, the more rationally, the more taxes they should pay. The less, conversely, the less somebody earns, the less they should pay. So equity. Number 2, fairness. The taxing power should be administered in a way that is fair, because it is fairness that encourages its citizens to give money voluntarily.
Okay.
So if you perceive, or if you believe that government is going to treat you fairly, you're, for example, going to report your income, by filing tax returns, you're going to report your income honestly. But if you don't feel that it's going to be fair, then you're not going to
report it.
And then 3 is accountability. That also encourages citizens to give their money to government. Government must be accountable for the uses of the tax that it has collected. So taxation then should be based on those principles. Now, from a power perspective, you expect that, and if you tie it to historically to how we've been governed, our system of government or governance is one that is based. It's a product of British colonialism, and it is a system of government that tries to protect the regime in power. It protected the colonial regime. Unfortunately, we didn't change it when we got independence. So we just changed the people that ran it, but it never changed. So the logic of that governance system is to maintain the regime that is in power, the government that is in power, the state that is in power. So they then use these powers of government that are at their disposal to keep citizens in check, to oppress citizens that are opposed to them, for example. And so the taxing power is used in that sense, tends to be used in that sense. It can be used, if you've noticed the goings on in the last, there have been several examples where Keroche Industries would be a very good example of this phenomenon. You'd ask yourself, were the tax assessments that were levied against Keroche Industries, were they fair? And even in terms of the administration of those taxes, was it fair, or was it being done to achieve certain political aims? So depending on whether you're in the good books of government, whether they perceive you as a regime opponent or a regime proponent, they will then use the tax regime to advance political regime interests.
Yeah,
and
because,
that then,
so for example, the Keroche one is interesting in the sense that foreign investors can and often do get tax holidays and breaks that can run for 5 years. This is a local investor that employs locals, uses local resources, actually has contributed to the growth of Naivasha town, for example, just as an instance. But the Kenya Revenue Authority then slaps her with a bill, which then you ask, over the past so many years that the said bill has accumulated, where were they?
Exactly.
Yeah, so it's in this context that that then we jump to the question of, if I am aggrieved, what are the recourses? What would cure my grievances?
So and this now takes me to the taxation regime, the tax administration regime. And how government works in this sense is that, as you know, is that we will give some bureaucrats some discretionary powers. discretionary in the sense that we want to leave it to them to determine how best to achieve a public purpose. But discretion means that they have a choice. They can go one direction or go
the other,
another direction. The problem is that in many cases, and the taxing regime is probably the worst in this sense in this country, it gives the Kenya Revenue Authority, which is a taxing master, the taxing authority, it gives the Kenya Revenue Authority immense discretionary powers. Essentially, KRA can do whatever they want to do. And for the most part, no one will stop them. So they decide, we're going to levy a tax assessment, whether it is due or not, and you have to respond, and we'll give you 30 days to respond. Conversely, KRA, for example, is never given timelines within which to resolve those disputes.
Tax disputes.
Yes. And then, so there's one instrument that KRA uses, which is very, very punitive. It's called the agency notice. An agency notice basically is an instruction to a bank or some other entity that holds money
on behalf of the
taxpayer. So they come to your bank and they'll say, Tom owes us 2 million shillings. We know he has 2 million in his account. You must give it to us.
So they embargo it, or they actually take away the money?
No, so your bank becomes the agency, hence agency notice, becomes the collection agency for KRA. In other words, it is an instruction to KRA, please remit this money to the Kenya Revenue Authority. And
without my authority.
They don't need your authority to do it. They don't need your permission to do it.
Okay.
And they can also embargo that account. Nothing comes in, nothing leaves that account. And so when you look at the cases across it, I mean, the book that I wrote on administrative law has a chapter on tax administration. And it just details all the problems that people go through.
Can you just speak to some of these problems? Because administrative law is interesting to the extent that it also suggests that the citizen has a certain degree of agency in intervening in laws, judicial processes. Even the KRA processes end up in a judicial review, isn't it? So can you just speak to this question of the administrative law and the questions of tax and taxation?
So yes, as a citizen, you have some recourse. But like I said, the fundamental problem is that as a starting point, KRA has a lot of power by law. So it is legal oppression, if you wish. The power there's no balance of power between the taxpayer and the tax collector. The tax collector can do whatever the tax collector wants. I think I have some details that I can just, because some of these things is usually difficult to remember often. So I can tell you what KRA does. There are a number of things that KRA does relative to the taxpayer. And the smaller taxpayers are even in a worse place off. Because you see, if you're a big industry,
company, you can hire a lawyer.
You can hire, these tax consultants like Price Waterhouse, and they'll help you to deal with it. But if you're a small entity,
man running a kiosk,
yes, it can be very oppressive. So there are a number of things that KRA can do. And many of these cases have gone to court, and the courts have faulted KRA for failing to adhere to established procedures, because there are procedures in the law, very elaborate procedures in the law for tax assessment. So, first of all, as a taxpayer, you're supposed to be issued with a proper tax assessment notice. In many cases, KRA does not do that. Sometimes also, KRA will issue you with a provisional tax assessment without a legal basis.
Okay. What does that mean?
They just come and say they want tax from you, but there's really no tax that is due.
Okay.
Well, they do that usually to forestall you from claiming for a tax refund.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's really how do I put it? Defense by offense. I don't know how to call it. So they do that. When they issue these agency notices, many of the times you will not get a notice of it. You'll just go to your bank and you'll find that
there's no money.
There's no money. They've just closed it.
Okay.
So there are very many abuses of the discretionary powers that are given to the Kenya revenue authorities. Let me give you others. Sometimes they'll not give you a hearing to respond to the agency notices. I'm not making these up. These are cases that have gone to court.
Okay.
And they are very many. What else do? They enforce those agency notices within shorter periods than the law permits. So say the law says they do it within 30 days, they'll do it within a week or whatever it is. They will fail to specify the legal basis for the penalties that they impose on you. They will take very long to respond to your objections, and nothing stops them from that. So, for example, the law requires a taxpayer to object to a tax assessment within 30 days. You must do it within 30 days.
Okay.
If you don't do it within 30 days, you'll be in a lot of trouble. However, and this is where I was saying that the law is very lopsided in favor of the Kenya Revenue Authority. So on the one hand, you as a taxpayer, you must act within 30 days. But as a KRA, there's no timeline. And so you find situations where the Kenya Revenue Authority is confirming those tax assessments even 2 years after you filed
your returns,
your tax objections. So you can imagine how punitive that can be, particularly for these small entities. I mean, where does a business have 2 million shillings to just be keeping, lying, waiting for the KRA to act after
2 years?
2 years. The business will be dead. So many businesses die as a result. So because you can see how it then becomes easy for these powers to be abused. If you're against the regime, if you're a regime opponent, you can suffer. Your businesses will suffer.
But under normal circumstances, should indeed be possible for ordinary citizens, businesses to, actively seek judicial review of some of this.
Yes.
This is abuse of power.
It is.
Right?
Yes.
So how do we go about seeking judicial review of this? Because what you've listed here, these are very well-known breaking of the law.
Yes.
Yes. So how do we go about this?
No, all of these examples I've given you are the outcomes of or instances that were revealed from judicial review cases.
Okay.
These people actually went to court.
Okay.
Yeah. But the trouble with judicial review, if you're looking at it from a business perspective, is it comes at the tail end of the abuse of power.
You've already suffered. So pretty much like post-mortem. We aren't curing anything.
No, this information we are getting after we have conducted the post-mortem on the business.
In which case, in some cases, the business
has even dead.
Collapsed.
Yes.
Okay. Which then brings us to the question of the finance bill.
Yes.
2023 and then 2024.
Yes.
That so the rejection of the finance bill 2024.
Yes.
Which there was actually decrying the consequences of finance bill 2023.
Yes.
But there was no a serious attempt to seek recourse. Legally, I think somebody went to court and they lost out. But so 2024, this is an example of now much more intensive and extensive engagement with the bill and multiple approaches: judicial review, activism, outright rejection, etc. Do you think that at any one time citizens should be alert and be ready to use all sorts of means to engage with the government in terms of how it thinks about tax and taxation.
Certainly. And I think here it is what's happening is very, very encouraging, because we have an increasingly very assertive, informed public that is telling the government that you must pass these laws, starting with the laws you're using to tax us. There must be laws that we approve of. If you don't, we will go to court and we will file constitutional petitions. So the essence of the constitutional petition in these instances is to say that the government is violating the human rights of the people, the rights of the people, or violating the constitution. And this is where now direct participation in democracy comes in. And I think this is where it has been articulated best in the context of legislation such as the finance bill. Actually, it's happened in both instances, 2023 and 2024. 2023 is just that the case took too long. Because now you see the court is coming with the Court of Appeal is coming with a verdict at the end of in 2024, 1 year post the
implementation of the tax policies, etc.
Yes, but what is critical about this is that the courts are now being assertive and saying that you cannot simply pay lip service to the idea of direct participation of citizens in lawmaking through public participation. You must demonstrate. So if people give you memoranda, you must demonstrate how you considered their memoranda. And you must give them reasons for either agreeing with them or not agreeing with them. This is what is coming out of particularly the Court of Appeal decision on the 2023 finance bill. So I suspect, and then you see that the people were very assertive with the 2024 bill, including storming Parliament and getting the president to step back and withdraw the bill. So these are, I think, are very welcome.
So it takes us back to the original question of donated power.
Yes,
so the
it is
donor
says,
power,
yes.
The power does not allow you to overstep the boundaries, isn't it? It brings us to the zillennial movement and zillennial question that underpinning it is the tax burden they have to carry for debts, for example, that they are not privy to debts that have probably not helped them. So can you speak a little bit to this?
Yeah, so there's quite a lot going on in that context. And this has to do with the International Monetary Fund, the IMF in particular. It used to be so countries go to the IMF when they're in trouble. Yeah, when they have difficulties balancing their budgets, to say it plainly. And so Kenya has had a problem. It seems that our expenditures far exceed our revenues. So when you go to an entity such as the IMF and their lenders, they will not just give you money. There'll be conditionalities to the money. And so on one hand, they'll be telling government, please spend less, reduce your expenditure, but also you have a lot of debt. So you need to raise more money from your citizens through taxation. Raise more revenue so that you can sort out your debts. But so when the citizens now look at this, first of all, they say, when you are talking with the IMF, you did not consult us. There's something that the IMF now calls the medium-term revenue strategy, MTRS. This now is what has replaced what used to be called the structural adjustment programs. The MTRS is a program or a strategy in which the IMF is telling the country or giving the country a strategy for managing reducing expenditure and raising revenues.
Resources.
So you heard of the motor vehicle circulation tax?
Yes.
That is where it originates from. The first time I read about it was in the MTRS. Do you know when the MTRS was put before Parliament? In March of this year. And you had people were asking very many questions about the motor vehicle circulation tax. So people were asking, what is the logic of this tax? How will it work? And when you get people from Treasury, like the principal secretary was on Citizen, he could not quite explain
where it's coming from,
or how it would be administered.
Yes, and how it fits in the larger logic of tax and taxation.
Yeah. So, and they kept shifting goalposts. At some point, they say, it will be on the value of the vehicle. But what is the value of the vehicle? Does the value include the tax that are already paid? Or then they'll say, there'll be a threshold. We will not levy this. It will be from, I think they set up an upper limit of 200,000 or something like that. And so it was not adding up. But above all, people were saying, but you've not consulted us in the making of the approval of the MTRS and the tax proposals that are based on it. So we reject it completely, and it's going to make our lives much more difficult. So what has then happened is that people, by asserting their Article 1 of the Constitution rights, are now saying that you must listen to us.
Yeah, I mean, so this brings me to the question of how do we actually make our tax and tax laws, and how do we make our tax policies? Because this question is about external. This is really about external governance of the country in any other way. Yes. What does does this mean for us? That if an external agent can actually invent all manner of taxes and forms of taxation, what does that mean for us in terms of democracy and governance?
It then means that in some fundamental respects, we have paid lip service to the idea of public participation.
Okay.
If you look, the copy of the MTRS that I got was branded on the cover, was branded top secret. How can a policy that is going to affect
citizens over 50 million Kenyans
be branded top secret? And then when you look at how it was formulated, it is basically the IMF telling the government what to do, and the IMF telling the government what to do in the form of what they call capacity building. Mm-hmm. Capacity building these days with the IMF is, it will be through workshops. So you'll have some IMF, the World Bank does that a lot as well. Some IMF staffers. Experts, experts. They come and they'll be telling you what to do. So I suspect, for example, with the motor vehicle circulation tax, is that somebody somewhere sitting at the IMF said, well, this can work in country X. Why don't we replicate it for Kenya? This has worked in whatever other country. Why can't we replicate the same in Kenya? They've not come to try and understand what is the nature of this economy, what kind of taxes do people pay when they import vehicles, etc. So they've not consulted. The local citizens, and yet this is happening. So it just tells me that up till 25th, that was the eventful day, up till 25th of June 2024, when the citizens invaded Parliament, we had not taken the question of public participation seriously enough.
But public participation is related to public pedagogy as well. I mean,
Yes.
people got to know, people
Yes.
got to be taught.
Mhm.
I mean, we're talking about tax. People
Yes.
always talk about tax,
Yes.
but they never talk about taxation.
Yes.
But it's not the tax that's the
Mhm.
problem. It's the taxation,
Yes.
the means,
Mhm.
the time,
The processes
the
of
amount.
decision making.
Exactly.
Yes.
So you as a lawyer, as somebody who researches on administrative law, would speak to the idea that people need to be taught or to educate themselves or to learn about tax and taxation because it directly affects governance.
Yes.
I mean, look, the government says, I go to pay civil servants, I
Yes.
go to pay members of parliament, I go to pay policy analysts, I go to pay researchers.
Yes.
I need this money.
Yes.
And you've given me discretionary powers.
Yes.
And you'll get supporters, right? But they are completely, they say the government needs tax.
Yes.
But the real question is taxation. So how do we go about teaching people or learning on ourselves, by ourselves, educating ourselves? How do we overcome the pedagogy of the oppressed? If we talk about Paul Frey's formulation.
Yes. Thank you very much. And so we go back to democracy theory now. And you recall I was talking of democracy as a system of making collective decisions.
Yes.
But to make collective decisions in that, to make collective decisions that are democratic, you need to meet a number of conditions. Yeah? You need for the people that are participating in the making of the decision to meet certain conditions. Two of those that come to mind immediately would be that there is enlightened understanding, which is where pedagogy comes in. Democracy, as they say in theory, is not a system of government for fools. The people that are participating in making the decisions must be informed. The other condition is that they must control the agenda. So briefly, the people, by asserting their Article 1 of the constitutional right, are saying that we control the agenda, not you as the agent. You do not tell us what to do. We are the people that tell you what to do. Number two, with enlightened understanding and what you were calling pedagogy, I think I'm really excited about what I have seen. And this has been enabled by technology. Mm-hmm. This revolution, if you want to call it, this ongoing revolution, this ongoing Gen Z revolution, if you want to call it that, has been enabled by technology. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you have a TikTok account. Mm-hmm. Now it behoves us all to be on these social media platforms. For me, TikTok has been fascinating because what this Gen Z did with the Finance Bill 2024 is somebody, an expert in finance, put together a script to educate the public on the bill. And then they had it translated. They asked other people, who speak
different languages. Yes.
And they translated it into 18 languages, 18 or more languages. Mm-hmm. And so it means that capacity building is happening. Civic education is happening. Mm-hmm. And they're doing it free of charge. They're not being paid to do it. You recall the decades of, the 2000s or the 1990s. Civic education was in vogue, but it was very, very costly process.
It's expensive.
Because it is centralized.
Yes.
But now technology means that, one, you don't have to spend any money. You just need these public-spirited experts in finance or whatever it is. And then you need other public-spirited individuals who can then speak to other people in different languages. And from TikTok, it will go to Twitter, it will to X, it will go to Facebook, it will go to all kinds of, it will go to WhatsApp. It means that within a very short time, a large segment of the population then is informed. And those that are not able to access these platforms will then be told,
It will go on radio,
Yes,
FM radio station.
yes. And in church meetings, in all other places of where people gather. So truly, I mean, then you have direct democracy happening. So for me, it's been fascinating watching what's happening in these spaces.
If the citizens on their own are actually engaging in civic education,
Yes,
one starts to wonder if the parliamentarians, the civil service, the policy makers
yes,
were only listening or were sensitive.
yes,
I mean, they would have figured out way before the bill went for the first reading, second reading, that there's something fatally flawed about this.
yes.
So how do we go about educating the government, the policy makers and the
Yes.
politicians and everybody who advises government about tax and taxation?
Yes,
Because it seems the citizens are now cued into the logic of how you think about tax. And I'll ask you another question towards how do you creatively think about tax? But in this case, we know the citizens are now much more alert. How do we make the government much more sensitive to what people ordinarily are thinking about tax and taxation?
I don't know how you do it. You recall, like I said, Ruto told us that the problem with representative government is that as soon as we give ourselves representatives, we cease to be free because they become out of touch and out of reach. That is a problem. They're just out of touch. I mean, they're completely out of touch with what is happening in the social media, or because they're benefiting from the status quo, they refuse to listen. And it is foolhardy, because then, because they're not listening, the citizens are forcing them to listen. The Finance Bill 2024 was not withdrawn because the president and the Kenya Kwanza administration wanted to withdraw it. In fact, if you listen to them today, they're still crying about it. They're still saying, this would not have happened if the finance bill had been enacted. In fact, there was nothing wrong with it, but we were forced to do it. They didn't want to do it. They were forced to do it. So when you're dealing with an increasingly assertive, informed citizenry, if you don't listen to them, they will force you to listen to them. And also a citizenry that is empowered by a very transformative constitution such as ours, you will be forced. They'll force you. Or they will recall you, because now the next resort of the citizens is to say, we asked you to vote no to the finance bill. However, you went on a frolic of your own and you voted yes. We are recalling you. In fact, many of them are just waiting for the reconstitution of the Electoral Commission, and then you will be seeing very many petitions to recall members of parliament.
Okay. How do we think about tax creatively? But nobody really wants to pay tax.
Yes.
Nobody would voluntarily just say, I'm willing. I mean, I've done this job. I've been paid 10,000. You know what the job was? Let me give you an example. You are harvesting mnazi, right? And so you climb the tree, the coconut tree, and you harvest 100 fruits. And the person says, look, I'm going to pay you 10 shillings per fruit. And you climb down, you are tired, you've risked falling and breaking your back or your arm. So you climb down, you pick one mnazi, you drink the water, you get paid 1,000 shillings. And the local taxman says, oh, great, you've earned 1,000 shillings. We think if you gave us 200 shillings, we would provide better service around. I mean, there's no logic there. How do we start to think about tax creatively? Because often people will pay if they see the logic, but the processes of making laws about tax and implementing the process of taxation themselves often are too dry. logic. So how do we start to think about tax? I know this is a difficult question, but we need to think about it.
True. Actually, there are studies that have been done on this, asking, do people pay taxes? Do people pay taxes voluntarily? In what contexts, for example, do people pay taxes voluntarily? And so the studies have shown that where a tax system is fair, people actually will be honest and will pay taxes. And this has been done across many countries. So our problem, I don't think, is that people do not want to pay taxes or will seek to evade taxes, so to speak. I think our problem is that we do not see where our taxes are going. We see that our taxes are in many cases put to bad uses. Because we all want, take any business. Let's say you export, you're in the business of exporting fruits. You want a road network that works. You want a port that works. You want good supply of electricity. So if somebody tells you that you want a fair, when it comes to income tax, you want for your, when you're talking about your employees, for example, you have a system that will treat you fair in terms of the payments that you make to your workers, whether it is the taxes that you pay on their behalf or their hospital insurance, name it. The
NHIF.
Yes, all of that. So if you can be guaranteed that things will work out okay, that this service, and you want security as well. You want good security. Nobody will steal your things. So if you can be assured that these things are going to be given to you, what incentives do you have not to pay tax? So in contexts where these services are provided, the studies show that people will then pay tax because it means they will make more money. If you have all these facilities or these services that are given to you, if they are working, chances are that if you do if you run your business well, you will make money and you will make more money. So I think it's not so much a question of people refusing to pay taxes. It is that our tax system, as I've told you, for example, in terms of how it is administered, is very often very, very unfair. And then the money is put to very bad uses, including paying for the offices of the spouses of the president, the deputy president, all of that nonsense.
Okay.
Why should we give our hard-earned money to give these busybodies?
It's just abuses of the donated power.
Yes.
But I mean, as we come to the end, I think tell us at least 3 things that an ordinary citizen should know about taxation and the law. At least 3 things.
One is that you have every right to contest a tax assessment, and it might be expensive, but obviously one would then encountering. I mean, going against the tax, the Kenya Revenue Authority often requires that you need a good lawyer, but certainly you have the right. Number 2, taxation matters a lot. So as a citizen, please always make sure that you participate in budget making processes, because that is where it all begins. And these budget making processes have been devolved, and they occur at 2 levels. They occur at the county level and at the national level. So there'll always be forums where you can participate as a citizen. Number 3, and I think this goes to associations, particularly associations of businesses, always get together so that you're able to get your views known beyond just participating in this forum. Make sure that you get your views known to your member of parliament.
Okay, thank you very much,
Yes.
Professor
I hope
Migai
that makes sense.
We hope that you will come back to this discussion. Maybe we'll have the conversation from a completely different perspective, but thank you very much for giving us kind of a legal way of thinking. I mean, it's always tricky for lawyers to simplify these things so that we understand them. We are very grateful for this.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you. My pleasure.
Afternoon.
And thank you for inviting me.
Okay.